think I'm going to go ahead and see if I can remove this felt strip here. Found a part online. I don't know, I took a look at it and I'm like, you know, why couldn't you just make that yourself? I don't know. Well, I'm just going to pull it out of here and see what we can see. Pretty nasty. It's got a little upturned bend there in the end there. I'm assuming that is by design. If not, that's a problem. Let's get this over to the bench, take a look at it. All right, this is the felt seal or slide, whatever you want to call it. And the material is just rotten. I just wanted to see how this thing was made before I either one, ordered a new pair, or two, tried to figure out if we could, or tried to remanufacture this. I mean, why couldn't you just get on Amazon and buy some felt? You know, ease that open a little bit, take the felt off, clean this thing up, put new felt on it, recrimp it. You know, because this is like 80 bucks a pair, you know. All right, I'm going to work on this a little while longer, and we'll see how far we get and make a decision as to whether or not I want to rebuild this one or order a new one. All right, well, there you have it. I basically just expanded that and took this gnarly looking piece out here. I bent it right there. This has got there's a piece of wire there. There's a piece of wire and then some metal. And the metal is got kind of like teeth in it, or holes in it. Pretty thin. It'd take some doing to remanufacture this. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Alright, I'm going to do a little head scratching. I'll be back in a minute. Alright, I think I gave up on the fabrication efforts for the felt strip. I dug into that thing, and the more I took it apart, the worse it got. So I went ahead and ordered a couple of new ones. They're coming in from the United Kingdom in a couple of weeks, hopefully. So if we get this sliding roof back together, we may just run it around town without those side rail felt strips for a while until the new ones come in the mail. However, I did find some of this Mercedes sliding paste, or whatever they call it in the service manual. Part number 001-989-4651. This is a ½ ounce dose of the genuine Mercedes stuff, which is like, I don't know, $1 million per tub. I don't know what it is. It's way over 100 bucks for a like a big can of it, you know. This should be enough to do this sunroof job, really. You shouldn't need to use a whole lot. However, I did search around on the internet and find some of this stuff. I've read some of the forums, and people seem to think that it's really good stuff. Look at that, food grade. And it's clean. How about that? That's amazing. So, but it's got PTFE, but basically that's Teflon, basically. So, synthetic multi-purpose grease. You know, this should be good for a mix of things where you have some plastics and some metals mixed together. And if you take a look at this stuff, it looks, you know, it looks a lot like, you know, it looks it looks really similar. So not sure if it's the same thing or not, but you know what, I'm gonna go with it. So if I run out of this, I'll use this. So the first thing I'm gonna do, probably off camera since it's kind of boring, is I'm gonna go ahead and clean up this gear set and clean up down in there, and then I will lube this thing up, and I think we'll go ahead and put this motor back on the car. I decided to disassemble this gear set just to see what was what. So we've got a keyed small gear there, and then we have the clutch material. As you can see, that's fairly shiny. And we have the I guess that's more clutch material there on the back side. On the let's see, is that a clutch disc, or is that just the? Yeah, I guess not. I guess. Yep, that's just part of the gear, I guess. Uh-oh, there's our key. There we go. Yep, don't want to lose that. You'd be into it. So if we take that off, and there we go, there's our gear. Why am I taking this apart? Why not? You know? Why not take it apart? Just to see what's what, you know? Look at that. There's some more stuff. What is that? Looks like a spring-loaded washer. Maybe not a spring-loaded washer, but it definitely got a couple of washers there. And all these things come together to offer some sort of a clutching action, I'm sure. Precisely how they work together, I'm not entirely sure. But I don't guess I really need to understand it in that great a detail. I just wanted to see how many parts were in this thing, just out of curiosity. So there you are. There is your gear mechanism from your motor on your sliding roof on your 126 Mercedes. You got your shaft, and you got two washers. You got the main gear here, and you have a key, and you have the smaller gear, and you have the, I'm gonna call this a clutch, for lack of a better word. I believe that's what it is. So there you are. I'm gonna clean this stuff up and then put it all back together. I'm gonna clean that grease out of there as well, and then and then after that we'll put some of our new Mercedes grease down in there before we put the cover back on. All right, I've got everything cleaned up here. I had the gear set disassembled and cleaned it up, just paper towel really, and reassembled it with some of this Mercedes grease in between each component. And there's our original bolts. Here is the nut that tightens down on the clutch, and here's the cover with all the old grease cleaned from it, and here is the motor with all of the grease cleaned from it as well. Thank you, Brake Clean. So we are ready to reassemble this guy and hopefully get it back on the car. All right, we got our motor nestled in its little cubby hole there. The clutch is, you know, tightened down just a little bit. And the way I'm going to go about that, there's a clutch setting in the manual, but it requires a type of torque wrench that I don't have. So I think what I'm going to do is just sort of tighten it down a little bit, and if it slips under normal operation, I'll tighten it a little more, and I'll just tighten it enough to where it operates correctly, and that should be a reasonable guesstimate. So the next thing I'm going to do is put that other tube in. This is the dump tube, I guess you might call it. This is the tube that the control cable goes into as the roof is opened, and you can see the flared end, and it will go up in the other slot, and it will go into the exit point of the motor. So, and it's got a clip right there. So let me put that in next. All right, we've got our Fancy Dan Mercedes lubricant here. By the way, this came from ECS Tuning. You're probably familiar with them. They do, you know, European car parts. So the book says to put some of this goop on the on this portion of the control cable. How much? Couldn't tell you. I could not tell you. Ooh, that's nice. That's some good slide paste there. I think they call that sliding paste comically in the service manual or something like that. Anyway, yeah, that's real nice. This is good stuff. I guess I'm just going to do the whole part of the worm gear part, you know? The whole part of the worm gear part? I don't know. That's probably enough to lubricate the universe, really. Oh man, look at that. So I'm going through the first 90-degree turn. Yeah, that was nice. So the maximum amount of force required to put this thing in there, they've got it in the service manual in newtons, but he translated it's about 11 pounds of force to move this thing around. So how much of this, I don't know, do you have to put goop on this part here too? I don't know. Kind of makes sense, really. So I've discovered something. Reinserting this into that tube with these little sections here, they need to be perfectly centered, right? So they will rub here, and you want to be careful about that. So I think it's best to do it a little bit at a time. Well, that's really tightening up. Why is it tightening up? All right, so I'm going to cut straight to the chase and just tell you how to get a Gen 1 W126 sliding roof, not tilting, sliding roof cable back into the tube, okay? I can't speak for the 300D. I can't speak for the SEL or the this or the Gen 2 cars. I'm talking about a Gen 1 126 300 SD, okay? Let's keep that in mind. So, these are the things you're going to need. You're going to need a little rag. You're going to need a hammer. You're going to need a pair of those. Now, you might think to yourself, well, this guy doesn't know what in the hell he's talking about. Well, I guarantee you I do. Because that cable is just not going to fall into, I'm going to use this as a demonstration piece, because clearly the cable is already in the car. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get that cable back in that car, and that's the reason why I'm going through this on the workbench over here, okay? I tried a lot of different things. So, the worm gear portion of the cable is, you know, about yay long, right? And it's a good bit more stiff than the rest of the cable. Now, you could get it back to the first bend, get it past the first bend, no problems, and then get way over there to the C-pillar on the driver's side, and then get past that bend, and I could get past that one, but after that, it would not budge any farther. So, you have to keep in mind, you're sitting on your knees in your front seat, and that tube is up there inside of the roof. It's long, it's wobbly, you don't want to bend it, okay? Even with me holding the tube with one hand and trying to force with the other, it was beyond my strength capability to force it up in there. I've read some people on the forums that say, oh, I just greased mine up and it just slipped right up in there with no problem whatsoever. I'm here to tell you, they're full of crap. And I'll go to the mat on that. They're full of crap. This is what I did. So the cable is a little over 1/8 of an inch thick, and it has two types of plastic covers around it, okay? You have some longer pieces that are pretty narrow, and you have some white pieces that are shorter and fatter, and you don't want to damage those for clear reasons because, you know, you wouldn't be able to get up in the tube. So anyway, so let's say the end of the tube is about right there. You want to get a rag on your really wide-jawed vice grips like this, okay? And slip your cable down inside there, okay? And you want to do is tighten it gently, not hard, because you don't want to deform the little plastic bits, okay? Not a lot of pressure, just gentle-like. You want it to be real gentle because you don't have the strength, at least I don't, to get that cable up in there, right? You need something that has a wide surface area to grab the cable, first off, okay? And using a solid thrusting motion like this isn't going to cut the mustard, okay? You've got to come in there with an sort of an impact methodology, right? So with one hand, you'll hold this up here like this, and with the other, you come in here with a hammer. And what you're going to do is you're going to tap on this part, on the tool, right? Just tap on that tool like that, okay? And you will be able to inch this thing up in there past that problematic area, okay? And then once this flange here gets up, say, close to the end of the tube, you know, you just back off, okay? And you pull it back some, reset, tap, tap, tap again, okay? That was the method that I ultimately used. Now, once I got the worm gear portion of the cable significantly past the C-pillar, it became more and more easy to push the cable into the tube. And eventually, it started freeing up. Now that the cable is in the car, I can move it along fairly well. So up next, I will show you the factory procedure for testing how much tension is required to move the cable back and forth inside the tube. The results we found from my car you might find interesting. So let's take a look at that next. All right, went down to the favorite discount retail big box, picked up a luggage scale. Goes up to 80 pounds. But this is what we got. I think the spec and the manual calls for a pull weight of around 11 pounds. I think that's around 30 Newton. So let's see what we get here. So I'm going to go ahead and gradually start pulling on this thing. The black mark will show you the maximum. That's about 4. There's a sticking point here, about right there. And I need to readjust my arm. So there we go. How far did that, where did that go to? They went to 17. Awesome. So that's you know, that's about 6 pounds more than what it's called for. Yep. So, yep, about 16. So that's there's a notch in here somewhere. I'm not sure what's going on with it. And I made a little hook right there for the scale. So, not sure what's going on there. The book says 11 pounds. I went up to 16. I checked it a few minutes ago and I went to say about 14. But anyway, regardless, this thing's going to go back together. All right, the adventure continues. So, a moment ago, you saw some video that you probably considered to be quite shocking. I decided to pull the motor back out of the car and figure out what is going on with this sliding roof cable assembly. So far, we've encountered issues with reinstalling the cabling, but we got that process nailed down. Although it's a bit unconventional, but you know what? It worked. So we're going to move on. We just got through observing some behavior that was up until now had continued to baffle me. But now that I think back on it, I realize that behavior that we were actually experiencing, that odd cable and motor behavior before this whole project started, and that was in fact the reason why I started this whole project, was because the sunroof would not go back and forth properly and it would stutter and vibrate and things like that. But at the time, I really didn't know what was going on. I think I've got it figured out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this thing apart. I'm going to take the back off again. All right, there we go. take that off too, so we can get this thing out of here again. Okay. Okay. So we're loosening the clutch. Come on. Guys, isn't it entirely necessary to have that many threads? All right. So the behavior that we've been seeing here is, and what we've been hearing, the cable comes in here, right here. This gear here grabs in the worm gear on the cable and moves it, you know, back and forth. Pretty easy, right? But it's slipping. Okay, the cable is basically, when it starts to slip, it rides on top of this and go brrr, brrr. That's what that sound is. Okay, and I was trying to rack my brain about, well, how do you tighten this thing up and make it not do that? Well, there's a missing piece of the puzzle, and it's this little piece right here. This little piece of metal right here. I did not find this until just recently. Okay, I looked at it in my trunk and went, what is that? I don't know what that is. And I thought, well, there's some piece left over from one of my projects, you know, and had no idea that it actually came out of the motor. Okay, so guess what this thing is? And you see it's got these two little flanges of metal here, and you have two little slots down in there. So this guy goes right down in here and slips into place. Now guess what that does? So we got a makeshift cable here. This is a cleaning brush, but when your cable comes in here, all right, it's going to be held in place. Okay, it's going to be held in place and tightened. It's going to be held up against this small gear. So when this guy goes in here like this, now your cable cannot wiggle around. So if this thing's not in here, there's nothing that prevents the cable from being pressed over here like this away from the gear. Because when the gear turns around, it's going to have a natural tendency to push the worm gear and the cable away from it. And if there's too much tension, it'll just slip and you go like that, you know. It just, anyway, so this guy in here will keep that from happening. What was going on before we started this whole project? This sliding roof was exhibiting this same behavior. It was sliding, it was stuttering. We also knew that this cover, it was pretty doggone loose. You know, the bolts were just barely hanging in there. I think they were all the way down, but they were just barely in there. So my opinion is, and I don't know this for a fact, but my opinion is that the cover was a little loose and it was allowing this to move up and down just enough to allow the cable to, the tension to be, you know, too loose for this thing to work properly. Why there are two holes in it is beyond me. Couldn't tell you. If you guys know, you let me know, okay? All right, I think we've solved the mystery. What I'm going to do right now, all I needed to do was pull this motor back out. I've had this motor in and out of this car like 6 times already. I'm an expert now. So what we're going to do right now is put this stupid thing back together, leaving that in there clearly, because that's all I wanted to do was put that in there. So, and what happened was, you remember, recall during one of the previous videos when I was removing this motor, I had already taken this cover off, right? Because I couldn't get the cable out. Now that I think about it, possibly the reason why I couldn't get the cable out was this thing was off kilter and preventing the cable from coming out. So I had to remove this so I could get in there and pull the gear set out. Then I could get the cable out. And when I was pulling that out, remember, I dropped the motor with the cover off. And at that time, this thing went cling. I never saw it. Matter of fact, I've been meaning to go back through one of my videos and see if I can actually see it fall. But I don't know. We'll check that later. I know it doesn't look like it, but I've got a lot of that good synthetic grease in there, and I'm going to go ahead and put another dose in it before I put the cover on. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put another dose of grease here on this worm gear, put this cover back on, and reinstall this motor in the car. I'm going to give it one more shot. All right, folks, I got the motor back in there, and I got the little metal piece back in there. Got my cable all lubed, got the tube lubed. Turn on the key there. Listen to the annoying buzzer. We'll go ahead and do a close action here. Look at that, look at that. I don't want to go too far because it'll fall out of the tube. Let's go back, let's do an open. No muss, no fuss. Or is it no fuss, no muss? I don't know, who cares? It works. Hallelujah, it works. There you go. So you probably saw earlier that we had a little more than the recommended 11 pounds. I think it's around 30 newtons of force that the book calls for, but that doesn't seem to bother the motor any. So it turns out, I believe, that the cover got loose and that little metal piece in there that holds the cable up against the gear, all that stuff had loosened up and it was not enabling the drive gear to interact with the cable and move it back and forth properly. So in essence, if I'd have known that, I probably didn't need to remove this, although it was a good idea anyway, because along the way, we figured out how this thing works, and we removed all of the old grease from inside the tube and on the cable and replaced it with some new modern stuff. So that's looking really good. So I think we're done with the motor part. Up next, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall the roof panel. All right, just a quick shot of the back of the car where the tube comes out of the sunroof right there. Does a 90-degree bend, a gradual one. Over here towards the corner, has a slight crook around that away. That's by design. And then goes down underneath that insulation, down through the C-pillar. That is where your sunroof tube goes. And this material here on the headliner is just got a rod in it, and it clips on these little metal clips over here. And the other pieces are easy to get off as well. You've seen me do that in a previous video. So here I am upside down in the back of my car, and I can barely talk, but I just wanted to give you a shot of what that tube looks like in the back here. So, all right, let's move on with the rest of the show. Well, all right, folks, I think I'm going to have to call this a video. I've discovered a couple of other things that we've got to take care of, so I've got quite a bit of work for us to do. We still have to put the rear interior back together. That includes the C-pillar covers and part of the rear headliner. Got a big old mess here in the trunk as well. Sorry about the poor lighting. Got to put the interior back in this thing, clean up all our tools, but for the most part, we're done back here except for a clutch adjustment, which I don't think we're going to have to do, to be honest with you. In the front interior, we still have to install the sunroof, or sliding roof rather, but we've got a couple of things we've got to swap out, namely the front and the rear seal. The rear seal is over there on the panel itself. After looking around, looking at this thing up close and looking at the one on the panel, I decided to, you know what, they're 38 years old, however old they are, I don't know how old they are, they're old. They need to be changed out, they're all cracked up, right? So I've got some genuine Mercedes seals on order, rear and front, and we're going to make it nice with the world once again. And over here on the workbench, we've got the rails on which the sunroof slides, and I got the good old Reinstall out, which is my favorite metal polish, and got some of the scratches out of that and got it buffed up looking pretty good, and I'm pretty pleased with the outcome there as well. But all in all, I say we're just about done. I think we're going to wrap this up and call it part 4. In part 5, we're going to wrap all this up, put everything back together, put on some new seals, and then we'll finally be able to test our new reconditioned or refurbished sliding roof. All right, folks, that's all for now. Appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I release a new video, don't forget to click that little bell down below. You guys have a good one, and remember to enjoy restoring your classic Mercedes, no matter how long it takes.